to the things that I never hold, to the things I never own. Somebody once told me that I was the best. Somebody once told me that I was alright. Somebody once told me I'll make them happiest. Somebody once told me that I would be the one. But I don't believe that I'll receive the things that I most am in this life to be. I don't believe that I'll receive, and I don't believe the things I never own. For the things I never own, for the things I never told, for the things I won't belong, for the things I don't so wrong, for the things I think wrong the time. Yeah, I'm saying, yeah, represent me, step up in my pen. I don't believe the devil was sleeping before the time was changed. Somebody once said to me they are all to blame. Somebody once told me we all belong somewhere. Somebody once told me that I was here to be part of something greater than the others seem to be. But I don't believe that everything they heard the sound of me, the sound of everything.
This is depicting the what painting? The fallen angel. The fallen angel, which is one half of the theme of today. Today is going to be covering David Wilcock and some other person identified as, what is it? Night Falling Angel. So this character makes videos, relentless videos, of course, just shorts, apparently. Most likely Instagram or TikTok, whatever. And I wanted to go over a few that just basically reflect the state of the mind of man, and of course the parallels to the obvious, as seen here. But of course, the denial from said character of somehow he's just ignorant to it all. But also, he's very wise, according to his own estimation. He knows more than the average bash on that platform called social media, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. So without further ado, what is he talking about? Let me pull up some of those videos. Sure, let's look at that one that was highlighted there. Let me see that one. So let's go to the start. Turn up the volume. I don't know why it's...
What my thoughts are on religion and what I believe in. This isn't something that I really enjoy talking about because I don't like to make people feel as if their belief system is under attack. I'm not gonna say all, but most Christians get very offended if you believe in something different than them. I think everyone is entitled to have their own opinion on something, especially when there are no facts. And I respect whatever you all choose to believe in, and I do not judge. Now, I simply just don't believe that we possess a necessary ability that would allow us to perceive the reasoning behind our existence. I think that it's very easy for people to believe that God created us simply because humans create things. As humans, this is what we do. We create, we invent. So it would seem as if the only possibility for our existence is that we were created. And that's really the only way that we're even capable of thinking about this. What about everything that we're not capable of thinking about? Like, we can only think about this in terms of what a human would do. But there's an entire other realm of possibilities that we're not even able to think about. Like, we don't even know how intelligent humans really are because the only thing we have to compare ourselves to are animals. You're not even capable of having a completely original...
So it just seems he's quick to put you in a box, right? Quick to tell you what you can and cannot perceive. But also doesn't want to offend. Makes you, or makes the plea to the so-called Christian that, oh, he's not out to get you. No. Of course not. He's not out to get you. He's just here to tell you. To instruct you in the ways of wisdom. Yes.
Thought or idea, but that's a whole nother conversation and video. You can only think about things that you've been made aware of. You can't create something new that doesn't directly relate to something that already exists. I'm sure there's 1,000 different well thought up arguments to defend the horrible things that are written in the Bible, and it's just too difficult for me to agree with. There's the one verse about how God told Abraham to bring his son up to the top of a mountain or something and sacrifice his son to prove his devotion to God. It doesn't make sense that God would give someone a child just to watch him be sacrificed. You understand too that you're all upset by the atrocities that you're reading inside the Epstein files? Well, according to your logic, all of these men that are guilty of doing the most disgusting things that you could possibly imagine, all they'll have to do is repent and ask for forgiveness, and they can still go to heaven just like you. So they're all basically just allowed to kill, rape, eat babies, and do ritualistic sacrifices and whatever the hell they're doing. But as long as they ask for forgiveness, they'll be forgiven. And the worst thing you can possibly do is choose to think logically about all of this and not believe in God, and you never ask for forgiveness. There's a verse in the Bible that says women are not permitted.
So, of course, he opened up by saying, there's probably ways to justify all these things, apparently. And he goes ahead to narrate some pretty cookie-cutter atheistic points, right? Refuting the Bible, or against the Bible, or the stories, or the words in the Bible. So there's nothing extraordinary, or there's nothing new about what this man is saying. So something I realized is that these points are basically recycled into the fold, right? So if you look back at when people like Jordan Maxwell or Bill Cooper, kind of like this old guard of supposed whistleblowers or truthers that were out there providing info to do with the hidden hand, the shadow government, the elites, etc., right? Then after them came the so-called next phase, right, of truthers. So you had things like Occupy New York, Occupy Wall Street, Anonymous. With the advent of the internet came all these counterculture, right? And you have the talking heads a lot that have to do with that, right? So you have the New Age influence. You have the influencers who are out there doing the conferences, the seminars, the gatherings, pumping out this information, upholding these so-called truths, creating a network or a web of so-called info that is basically labeled as the truth. The truth. Which is then accepted by the people who don't accept the status quo. They don't accept the narrative. They're either disillusioned by their religion, or they are just irreligious and are easily trapped or enticed by the so-called title of spiritual but not religious. And of course, what they preach, which is unity, this kind of relative, ambiguous definition of truth or love, self-governance, no harm principle, this, that, the other, right? All dead ends. And what ends up happening is just those people age out and were engulfed by this society, the culture. We're chewed out and spit out. But then you have the younger generation coming up, and they have to be fed the same nonsense. They have to be fed the same kind of principles of, oh, people are waking up. People are waking up. They see the lies and this. And then they're just fed the same old nonsense, same old bash. And so things that come up are the kind of novelty factor. So, for example, the novelty factor of the flat earth, the novelty factor of disclosure that has always been kind of pushed, the novelty factor of the breakaway civilization, or of this lost civilization, parallel timelines, galactic family, the interdimensional reality of our existence, and this and that and the other. So all of that gets recycled and then bashed, fed into the coming up, the rising generation, right? All the while, the old culture gets chewed up, spit out, and turned into Soylent Green. Disposed of because they believed the Hydra. They believed the multiplicity of the lie, which ended up in a dead end. And we'll see how that is relevant with the situation involving David Wilcock that is making its headline rounds as we speak. And of course, it's no coincidence that that is the case.
To speak in church. There's thousands of other things that are in the Bible that it doesn't make sense. So God gave us free will, right? So that means he gave all of us the freedom to make our own decision on what to believe in. He gives us all free will, but then he gets upset if you choose not to believe in him and you're going to go to hell. I don't know, I have a very hard time believing in God. Why would he create all of these people just to watch them suffer? Why would he create people just to watch them abuse and manipulate each other? But with all that being said, with my free will that I was given, I choose to believe in spirituality instead. And I could go on and on about this, but just one more point I'm going to make. People are always trying to say that they're attempting to keep God away from us and steer us away from God. Like, oh, well then why don't they teach it in school? They don't teach it in school because people hold different religions. School is a psyop anyway because they're trying to teach you about fake history. You can't really say they're attempting to hide it from us because it's in the Pledge of Allegiance. When you go to court, you have to swear on a Bible. Most politicians claim to believe in God. And here's the best one. They sell Bibles. If they didn't want you to be aware of God and they wanted to keep you away from the supposed truth, then they just wouldn't sell Bibles. They wouldn't be talking about it all the time. If you can agree that history is made up and it's been rewritten many times and there's been resets, why would the Bible still even be around? I don't know. I respect everyone's beliefs though, and I'm sure there's an argument to be made about everything that I just said, but I just haven't heard a really good one yet. And just know that this isn't an attack on anyone's religion. This is just me giving my own personal thoughts, because that's what I do. I give my honest and my sincerest opinions no matter what the topic is. You should never look at someone differently just based on what they believe in, because it's what they want. It's just another division tool. I want you to choose a side constantly. Now, which side are you on? Science or religion? All right, now fight about it. My opinion.
Right. So, constantly making attacks against the so-called Bible and then saying, "Oh, I'm not here to attack." So it's just the ultimate, mind bender, gaslighter, divisor, right? The splitter of sides, calling you to dwell in the gray because there's no black and white, apparently, and it's all just manipulation. Oh, it's just there to control you, bud. As he says things to control you, right? So which is it? Everything that he said, of course, is to the actual truth seeker. It's not going to be enough to just dismiss it. Everything that he says must be verified, right? Is it actually the case? To the person that does not want or cannot afford this to be a opportunity to look outside of their own biases and their own conclusions, it's good enough for them to just be like, "Oh yeah, of course the Bible's stupid, of course this and that and that and the other," and that's good enough for them to continue in their own bash. But to the other person, it's like, wait a second. Why is this person so, adamant or so resentful, so spiteful against the Bible in particular? So notice how he said, "I'm not against anybody's religions, but, the Christian, what bashes? What kind of God would forgive?" So the thing that he said about, you could be the most heinous person, and if you repent, God will forgive you. Isn't that what you boast and constantly, protest against? Go on the streets banging pots and pans and saying, "Oh, everybody should just love one another and hold each other's hands." That would entail forgiveness, would it not? Because how can you hold everyone's hand if you don't forgive? Unless you're promoting a conditional love, where then man becomes the executor of his own relative justice based on nothing, based on his own imagination, based on his own whims, on his own authority. Whereas God is the one who forgives. And of course, God sees the intents of the heart. Just because you say, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry," or "I repent of this," doesn't mean that you automatically are granted forgiveness. It's the matters of the heart. If there is a true transformation, a true spiritual, renewal, because of your own conviction of your own wrongdoing, of the transgression against heaven, ultimately, that you recognize that you are an active participant of, then of course God has the ability to wipe away that guilt or that punishment that you deserve, which is death, and graft you into life. And how is that not the ultimate victory? That despite each person's own transgression against God, God forgives. That is a loving Father. So a rebellious child that goes out and does his own defiling in the world and does the most atrocious things. Ultimately, yes, everything that he does is against a holy God. So if he goes out and kills, it's a transgression against God. Of course, he takes away that which God grants. So God grants life. And if somebody goes out and kills that life that God brings forth, then sure, you're accountable for that. But if you just want to make it right in the fleshly sense and make reparations for the so-called person you eliminated, well, that's you trying to make things right, instead of recognizing your transgression against the heavenly living God. How can you make right with that? How can you make good with God, the Creator? Well, ultimately, you are at His mercy. So you can try and ask forgiveness from men, but it's not the forgiveness of man that saves you. It's the forgiveness of God, which grants life. And they making you white as snow, though you are filthy rag, a transgressor. So that to me speaks of God's mercy. And to him, it speaks of God's somehow injustice, because God is somehow able to be bamboozled by people that to him seem not worthy of receiving forgiveness. Interesting. Let's look at this other one here. One sec. So we're going to go through a couple of these, or I should say a few. Why does it always just have it on mute? I have to restart it. So, just to reiterate, these videos are from this person's account. Which started in February of this month, of this year. So it's relatively new account. And is doing his rounds, is putting out his influence. And even though he speaks against, what most people would consider the powers that shouldn't be, or the elite, or this or the other, he's very much in line with the modus operandi, or the relentless attack that is seen in the world against a holy God. And they always hide behind this kind of respect for all religions. But it's interesting that they particularly focus on the attack of the God described in the Holy Bible. Funny how that works.
This almost feels like a curse. It's actually very unfortunate of how aware we are of our own existence.
So he says, self-awareness seems like a curse. So that is a direct parallel to what, to me, has always struck me as one of the most fascinating contemplations one could come to meander in. So self-awareness. And then when you read the account of how man is described to have been self-aware after the fall, after transgressing against God, that is a profound description. Because previous to that, man walked with God. And after transgressing against God or disobeying God, man becomes self-aware of his nakedness, which is also a profound contemplation. So it's as though he was uncovered, while previously he had this covering. And the parallels of when Jesus calls to the Father and asks him to glorify him with the same glory he had with God from the beginning. So man lost a covering. So what covered man prior to his disobedience that led him to therefore come to see himself in a different light?
To a certain degree, we're able to understand the complexities of life, but we're not able to grasp or comprehend the how or the why. Just like remaining ignorant to all of the stuff going on around the world right now. If we were just ignorant to the reasoning behind our own existence, then life would be much, much easier. Life is undoubtedly difficult, and the more aware you become of everything, your surroundings and existence, consciousness, it just gets even more difficult. Because we have a strong desire to learn and ask why and how. But it's like the most important questions you could possibly ask just don't have answers. God and religion is not an answer. Scientific explanation is not an answer. Simulation theory is not an answer. These are just different options attempting to define the how. But none of this can possibly answer the why. I'm not interested in the how. I'm interested in the why and the what. What is this seemingly random happening that we call life and existence?
Shoot your thumb up, boy.
For what?
Excuse me, everybody! This man came to me, a 13-year-old!
So those existential questions this man puts forward, of course, are what has captivated man as long as we can tell. But he quickly says that, okay, science is not an answer, religion isn't an answer. So he's kind of steering the audience to a particular conclusion. He's funneling people to come to accept something that supposedly hasn't come forth yet, or to lead the audience to a particular conclusion that they must always be kind of rejecting, but convincing themselves that they are open. So open to what? Novelty. To always be questioning, critical mind. There's nothing new, right? I remember the same bash kind of mind being preached to my generation. The sky's the limit. Critical thinking is the utmost importance. This and the other. So that just leaves people accepting their own biases, their own relative existence, and not giving a bash about the truth, even though you say you're relentlessly critical of truth claims or any type of kind of official narrative or institution, whether it be it local or international, global, of power, right? So to be critical of policy or critical of why should we do this over that type thing, right? But this all just seems like a meandering and an asymptote, presenting something but never quite arriving at anything. So let's see if I can quickly pause this before it starts playing so that I can turn the volume up.
The entire world is controlled and managed by secret societies that serve and worship a non-human entity. Call him Lucifer, call him Satan, reptilian, alien, whatever you want to call him.
So remember
He's
this.
there. It's not something that's new. It's been passed down through.
So he's presenting that as fact, right? The world is run by secret societies whose members worship Satan.
Generations, and it's been happening for thousands of years. The reason why they've been so successful all this time is because they're easily able to control and manipulate the world through psychological operations, mass manipulative constructs that we unintentionally pass on to our kids. We are deliberately made aware of very specific things that help push agendas. So everyone thinks that the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or Freemasons are the ones that are running the world. 33rd degree Freemasons are very different than just your average Freemason, because anyone can really just become a Freemason. 33rd degree Masons are basically just like the front men, the foot soldiers for another entity, and who they take orders from is the Jesuit Council. Jesuits control the Freemasons, the CIA, the Secret Service, the Council of Foreign Affairs, the cartel, the mafias, the Khazarian mafia. There's many different mafias that are all controlled by the Jesuits. This is just a few of the secret societies, by the way. Now, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers pretty much own everything in the world, but that doesn't mean that they control the world. They are the front men for the Jesuits and the black nobility. They basically want us to believe that the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers are controlling the world. They're just a front to the people to conceal the actual power. And because they own everything in the world, this allows them to fund all of these secret societies. The actual dominant power above all of these societies is the black nobility, which is ran by the Black Pope. There are three popes: the White Pope, the Gray Pope, and the Black Pope. White Pope, which is Pope Leo right now, the last pope, is just a front man for the people, but he is controlled by the Black Pope. Freemasons are actually at the very bottom of the list when it comes to actual power and control. But nonetheless, all of these secret societies still do worship and serve this non-human entity at the top. Through generations, pretty much every move they make is to bring about this new world order. One world religion. They make moves that they don't expect to see the results from in their lifetime.
How'd they mess your face up?
With that frequency thing, they like do. There's
The world is controlled and managed by secret societies that serve and worship a non-human entity. Call him Lucifer, call him Satan, reptilian, alien, whatever you want to call him, he's there. It's not something.
So, okay, remember that, because that's important for what he says in another rant. But the other thing that was interesting here is that he points to the Black Pope, right? The Jesuit. The militant side of the so-called priesthood of the Catholic Church, the Catholic institution. So that's who apparently runs the world, huh? Interesting. And if this man ever comes across this recording, this is an opportunity to say to this man to reconsider what is being said. What is the influence running through your heart? What is the influence that is there when you go to sleep, when you wake up in the morning? The narrative of this discovery, progress, betterment. Is it actually fulfilling the promise, or is it just keeping you in a state of complete disillusion, complete helplessness, all while dangling, the carrot in front of you to keep you treading in the water you're drowning in? But the one who can rescue you and translate you from that darkness to the marvelous light is the one who has overcome the world, overcome the things that you articulately describe as being unjust, unsatisfactory to what inwardly you recognize as profoundly wrong. there's something profoundly wrong. And it's not the actual creation itself, but the actual interpretation through man. The way man is operating in said order. So the recognition that the operation that's within man is rebellious in its most foundational mode, or in its root, and has led man to operate in all these iterations and all these splinterings of diversification and liberation, an attempt or description, and calling himself, attempting to convince himself that it's an act of liberation from an apparent tyrannical order, something we need to escape from. And a perfect example of that would be the enamoration, the enamorment, the romantic aspect of man trying to escape Earth. Man knows instinctively that the flesh is a prison, or at the very least, a boundary, right? A veil of which man is to overcome. But the difference is whether man allows God to restore him and bring him into the restoration that he himself, God, has accomplished for eternity to those who believe. Or man wants to rely on himself to be his own savior, to be the one that by his own efforts can be able to come to transmute, overcome. So to me, it's clear that the attempt of man is led by this rebellious spirit that says F you to God and his redemptive work and gift he extends to man in exchange for what man has determined to be his own way, and attempting to escape, transcend the order of God on his own terms, which is where you see this idea of hybridization, AI, the downloading of consciousness into this kind of cloud, etc., etc., etc. And there's nothing new under the sun. This is a very old, ancient mechanism, right? The promise of the world is to convince man that he can transcend, that he can overcome, the created order by his own means, versus by trusting in God who created him. So which is it? And in that sense, it is black and white. There's no middle ground.
Area. Looking at something as if there's... Forget that facts are black and white, but the truth is always located somewhere inside the gray area. Looking at something...
Oh, calling people into the gray. So it's not black and white, but the truth is found somewhere in the gray. What bash. What absolute nonsense.
As if there's always a right and a wrong isn't the right perspective to have. Just because you think that something isn't wrong, that doesn't necessarily make it right. And something that isn't right doesn't automatically make it wrong. There's an area in between our own personal definitions of right and wrong. Just like there's a...
So, this man doesn't live that way at all. This is all just headiness, right? Philosophical meanderings, because he's very quick to determine things like human trafficking and all these kind of injustices that he would come to pinpoint in the world, and he would land on a judgment and call that wrong? Or is he going to go into nuance and say, well, you know what, in this circumstance, human trafficking is okay, and in this other instance, this other behavior is okay, but not in this other one, and this, because guys, it's the gray. The truth is in the gray. So of course he doesn't live that way. It just sounds like a guru thing, right? To say, because it entices people, because they're just that, enticing words that really mean nothing.
A space that exists in between good and evil. There is no person or thing that is all good or all evil. We all just exist inside the gray area. This is something that's very important to keep in mind when attempting to discover real truth. Facts can often be misleading and are used as a form of deception. There's shades of deception like paltering. This is a tactic where someone will use truthful statements to create a false impression, using facts to mislead people towards false truths. This is something that's used on the population every single day. So you have to be very careful when interpreting different facts, because they'll often lead you down the wrong path.
No. What leads you down the wrong path is coming to conclude that there is no right and wrong. Because all what he's saying here now, or the influence that is, or the enchantment, right, the spell that is being put forth by what he's saying, is basically sympathy for the devil. And with that, you erode, you corrode, you corrupt man, because you instill this idea, this kind of worm that eats away and slowly sears a man's conscience. And instead of the blade of truth, which is sharper than any two-edged sword, you bludgeon and take away the sharpness, where it's just a blunt object that you're just bashing yourself relentlessly with. Punch drunk. So this spell that this man is under, and ultimately is either knowingly or unknowingly promoting, is to be bludgeoned, right? To be just punch drunk, in a state of just cluelessness. Because it's just the gray after all. You can't really know. You can't really know, because there's no such thing as good or evil. It's just somehow just blurry. It's just gray. Just gray. So, okay. Thanks for that one, Falling Angel. Let's see what you got for us now here.
Girl spit in a Bible, and that's how I knew right then and there that she was the one.
This is the most disturbing admission that I came across. So remember when he said, "Oh, I'm not here to disrespect anyone's, religion or this or the other. I'm just blah blah blah," right? But this declaration, right, or this admission, just lets you know really what's in this man's heart. So let's hear it again.
The girl spit in a Bible, and that. One time my girl spit in a Bible, and that's how I knew right then and there that she was the one. That's not even what I. One time my girl spit in a Bible, and that's how I knew right then and there that she was the one.
That's how you know, people. That's how you know that you should be with that person. Can you imagine? That is his aha moment. When his so-called girl spit into a Bible. And that's how he knew she was the one. Amazing. Amazing. Amazing.
That's not even what I wanted to talk about. So there are so many reasons
It's not what you wanted to talk about, but that's what you started with. Amazing. Amazing.
why we will never escape the system that is in control of every aspect of our life from start to finish. The system set in place isn't broken, it's operating exactly as it was meant to. The way that it operates is intended to steer us away from ever even having the opportunity to escape. Now, there are all different types of people who are not only stopping growth and holding us back as a society, but they are the reason why the population is so easily manipulated, and the reason why the puppet masters will never stop manipulating us with psychological operations. People who obsess over and support professional sports, people who think that we went to the moon and continue to do so, the people who idolize celebrities, people who haven't figured out yet that voting isn't real and it's two wings of the same bird, people who believe in any type of religion at all, people who watch and trust the news. The game requires participation, and as soon as everyone stops participating, then there is no game, and the system will collapse.
Have any of y'all seen the video yet of the astronaut Chris?
So interesting, to say the least. But then again, there's nothing new under the sun. What this man is describing is basically the pillars necessary to uphold the lie. And it's of no coincidence that, of course, it has to do with distraction. It has to do with deceptive mechanisms to keep man in this grind, right? To not question what is behind this machine that we call society, that we call culture, that we call governance, that we call authority, that we call economy, that we call global affairs, trade, international development, this, that, and the other. Because ultimately, I believe everyone has heard this message. That's why you have the examples of people kind of wanting to go into creating their own communities. But of course, then you have the bitter taste or the aftermath of those, because you have examples of, oh well, they just mass suicide, or they're just cults. So people, stay away from these communities that are calling you to, live simple, back to the earth, live off the land, kind of these principles, blah blah blah, right? But of course, it was a huge marketable enterprise with the whole sustainability spin to it that began in the early 2000s. But of course, it led nowhere. And it's by design. The machine, that's why they called it the Industrial Revolution. Everything was being put in place to uphold this destructive machine, to uphold the lie. And it garbles up everything in its path. Destruction is its name. And it's not about destroying it from the inside out, but rather be still in the Lord. For his promises are true and faithful. Whereas you want to change the flesh and rearrange the world, God promises to rearrange your spirit, to renew your spirit, so that nothing in the fleshly world may overcome you, but you overcome the world. For Christ has overcome and defeated death and given you victory over the transgression that brought you to death. For all men have sinned and so therefore we are not guiltless, and are, of course, in need of the gift of life that is in our Savior Jesus Christ. But this man will convince you, or at least he will try to convince you, that you must just relentlessly seek and be afraid. And you must relentlessly see to yourself, look to yourself. Look to yourself for the answers. Look to yourself. Even though it was yourself that led you to the darkness which you're trying to escape.
So the existence of evil doesn't prove the existence of good. I keep seeing how people are excited right now about all the evil that's being revealed in the world, as if this proves the existence of God. This isn't something that's just proof on its own. Not everything has a direct opposite. You've just been conditioned to think this way. Your mind is constantly trying to predict things and find patterns and opposites. But this statement is no different from saying the existence of water proves the existence of fire. It's like saying there's a floor, so there must be a ceiling. If fire exists, that's not proof that water exists. Fire exists because fire exists. Just like a floor doesn't prove a ceiling. What if you're standing outside on a deck? What if you're standing in an unfinished house that only has flooring? Opposites are just something that humans created. What's the opposite of orange? What's the opposite of a tree? What's the opposite of a cloud, the ocean, animals? The existence of dark doesn't prove the existence of light. Imagine you live on a dark planet with no sun and no stars in sight. Only darkness would exist in this place. So would you just assume that there must be light because all you know is dark? You wouldn't even know what light is because you've never seen light. So no, the existence of evil does not prove the existence of good.
You're like an Indian.
Oh, so it doesn't prove, right? So keep that in mind again. The existence of evil doesn't prove the existence of good. Interesting. So we just instinctively know good and evil, right? That's the whole thing. Man is essentially cursed to perceive the knowledge of good and evil. Yet it is all useless, or it is all basically relative, absent the truth. So while man is obsessing and chasing himself around and accrediting himself with the ability to know good and evil, the truth is what sets you free from the judgment of seeing or perceiving good and evil. Because only in the truth does one overcome that judgment that only God is able to perfectly divide. Because without God, then truly it's just up to man to decide what good and evil is. So in that sense, yeah, man gets to decide ultimately, arbitrarily. But God is the only one who can override or make that perfect judgment, which is how we see, which is why we're able to perceive, which is why we're able to exist to begin with, because God has perfectly divided the light from the darkness. So that's another aspect of contemplation which has always fascinated me. How is it that we know that our body ends and begins, or how is it that we can distinguish any form in the world? Well, it's because there's distinction between things and thingness or beingness, all the way to the thought and distinguishing between thoughts. What is that marker? How is it that one can distinguish this from that? Well, none of that could be even discernible if there wasn't a perfect divider. If there wasn't the source or the essence by which distinction is made. And of course, God is good. God is light. God is love. God is good. And the darkness comprehended not the light. Thoughts and ideas are completely dependent on connection. Let's take a listen.
If you believe that the earth and everything on it was created by some type of creator, whatever you want to call him, it's because this is the only way your mind will even allow you to think about this. Because remember, everything that you have the ability to think about has to come from somewhere else first. Because like I've said before, there needs to be some type of connection and inspiration for a new idea or thought to be had. There are no original thoughts. Every idea relates to something that already exists. We're far more limited than anyone is.
So even to his own conclusions, right? So everything that he's saying was influenced by something before. So he should be able to recognize that then each man operates by an influence that essentially resides in him or that has overtaken him, right? So that is why it is clear to any honest man to admit that, okay, there is obviously something that influences people. Because certainly people aren't the source of their own influence. Or to at least believe that would be very arrogant, to say the least. Nonetheless, of course, people have the so-called free will to either heed to a particular influence or to reject it. And this is where the contemplation of the Spirit of God versus the spirit of Antichrist come into play. So either it's alignment, right, to the Creator, to the will of God, or alignment to the Antichrist spirit, which is ultimately the carnal mind or the adversary or the enmity against God. And there's no in between, because you cannot be serving two masters. For either one is carnally minded, which ultimately leads to death, or one is spiritually minded, which resides in life and only leads to life. Amen.
Even aware of. So the idea of some grand ultimate creator creating the world and all of us started somewhere. And the idea started through a connection and inspiration. What do we have on the earth that creates life? Mothers. A mother creates life. Seeds create life.
No, because the mother absent the father does not create anything. So this is all just New Age nonsense, of course.
One form of life creates another life. This is the connection that was made that started the idea of a god. So from a human perspective, the only possibility you could potentially even think about to try and explain the reasoning behind your existence is through creation. Do you understand that you're extremely limited?
Yes, and so please refer, if this young man ever has the discipline to read the Bible, refer to Romans 1. Because he's very assertive in that fact that, yes, all of creation does speak to a creator. Everything points, no matter where you look in creation, it all points to a creator. From the microscopic to the macroscopic. But ultimately, it's from the outside, right? From the external to the internal. Every, no matter where you look, it all speaks to a living creator.
mind limits you to only thinking about things that you could possibly make a connection to. This is the only way we are even capable of thinking about this. But there is an entire other realm of possibilities that you just cannot think about. Or if you want to be optimistic about it.
Really? So just by you saying that there's a whole other realm that you can't even think about, I mean, that just means that you did have access to that to come to the conclusion that there is this whole other realm that you cannot think about. I mean, it's just nonsense.
It's something that we just haven't made a connection to just yet. Do you get it? That your thought process is unbelievably limited to what you are able to make a connection to. Creation is not the only possibility. It is the only possibility from a human perspective. Okay, so real quick, I'll just put myself inside the mind of someone who thinks the earth was created by a god. According to your logic, if there's a creation, there must be a creator. This means that the creator is a creation. That would mean that our creator has a
No, that's a huge leap. The creator doesn't necessitate a creator or infinite regress, right? For even the philosophers that he might appeal to, make that argument that, okay, you have to have an uncaused cause. So by saying that there's a creator doesn't mean that the creator has a creator. That's an assumption that the creator is made up of whatever he's creating, which does not follow. The creator can be distinct from the creation.
creator. It means the creator's creator has a creator. So is there just an infinite amount of creators creating creators until there was our creator that chose not to create another creator, but chose to create the universe? So even if there is an infinite amount of creators and our creator created us, our creator chose to give you the ability to use logic. Why are you choosing faith over logic? Why are you choosing to base your entire existence off a man-made book that was created with the intention of manipulating you? You wouldn't require proof to know that the Bible is a psyop if you just use a bit of logic, something that your creator chose to give you.
So even that admission that logic is somehow separate from belief, right, or faith. That's always interesting to contemplate on. But ultimately, it's an appeal to side with so-called logic over belief or faith because somehow it's presented as being superior. So logic somehow is superior to faith. So logic is just basically the mechanism by which to arrive at belief or faith. So to say to prefer logic just means to, okay, accept the faculties by which, each person has to arrive at their own conclusion, at the conclusions that they have sided with, right? So if somebody has concluded to be an atheist over somebody that has concluded to be a theist or to believe, right? The conclusion is belief versus unbelief. But both can be said to have used the faculty of discernment, which, could be termed logic, or basically the faculties by which you have the ability to discern, to be self-aware, to filter the ongoings of the outward and the inward. So it's just profoundly kind of flawed, right? To postrate as though logic is somehow superior to belief or faith. In fact, I think when it's presented as such, logic actually becomes very limited in the ability that is God-given to each person to navigate this vast landscape, right, of evidences of your own experience or the own reflections or the own convictions of reality. So how you perceive, if you're going to say should be censored by logic, then you're going to be trapped. Versus the conviction of, okay, yes, I recognize what people mean when they say logic, but it's not going to trap me to conclude certain things that I know to be true. So the truth overrides so-called logic, because logic can actually be used to convince people to do evil. I won't necessarily get into that, but let's continue with fallen angels' wisdom here. If anybody has their own thoughts, of course, you can comment or not. But ultimately, this is a deep dive or a reflection of an influence that's out there in the world and influencing men and women. This person just happens to be a mouthpiece for that influence. But I certainly am convinced that though the enemy, right, or Satan, wishes to use this influence for evil, but ultimately one can have the certainty that God will ultimately use it for good to glorify God. Because I know, for example, that there are people that are going to see this or have this message come across them, and it might trigger something in them that is opposite to the intents of the influence, right? Because if the intent of this influence is to, keep you at bay or keep you from arriving at the conclusion that there is a true living God that offers a gift that is freely given to you, that people will actually use this influence to turn to the truth. Or rather, the influence that this triggers in them actually pushes them or is instrumental to them arriving at this correction, right? To the conclusion that I was wrong. To the conclusion that how could I have gone along with this? Amen.
Earth and everything on it was created by some type of creator, whatever you want to call him. It's because this is the only way your mind will even allow you to think about this. Because remember, everything that you have the ability to think about has to come from some.
We already saw that, did we not?
There really is no such thing as proof or.
So the title is Truth Doesn't Exist. So this is a self-defeating statement. So truth doesn't exist? Well, that's a true statement. So I guess it is meaningless, right? The own statement is self-defeating. So it's interesting that this man, in a later video, I don't know if I saved it, but this man claims to know more than the average person. But yet he makes these blunders of making self-defeating statements. So I think this is just probably just a troll, right? A shill. Kind of like Jake the a-hole in the flat earth community a long time, many years ago. And it's the same type of kind of vibe I get from this individual, but those characters are kind of put in place to keep the ebb and flow of information, all the while providing kind of like this entertainment, this kind of flavor, this kind of keeping in line, so to speak, right? Nudging people into specific conclusions.
Or evidence anymore. There possibly never was. You were just deceived into thinking that there was. There's no such thing as a trustworthy source. There's no such thing as verified information. There's no such thing as a fact checker.
So how does this man ever come to a conclusion? If everything is true that he's saying, even though he states that it doesn't, so there's no such thing as, verifiable anything. So then how can he make these assertions that the Bible is false or that the religion is, control or this? I mean, it's just bashed. Just bashed.
When the ones creating these so-called fact checkers are the same ones who have the intention of manipulating you. There's no such thing as truthful information when the information that's presented to us is deliberate misinformation. When everyone's personal truths differ from...
So everything that he's saying actually is evidence that there is the lie and the truth. But instead, he's influencing you to conclude that there's no such thing as truth, just ambiguity, and basically you can't trust anything but yourself. So it's basically leading you to just self-boast, leading you to arrive at solipsism, to basically only rely on yourself. So it's the same playbook that you find in the New Age, that you find in the Enlightenment, that you find in this whole self-wisdom, left-hand path, because it's basically going his own way. Forget the old path of righteousness. Forget the old ways of the order, the created order. Forget the order of God. Instead, go out and carve a way of your own. I did it my way.
From each other, there's no such thing as a fact anymore. There exists supposed proof and evidence to back and support things which oppose each other. And depending on who you listen to and which source you're reading from, you're going to receive different answers for the same questions. Deception is reaching a point where you almost have to say, I don't know. But for some reason, people are still choosing to say that they do know. The only advantage you now possess is your ability to use proper discernment, to use your own logic and critically think before you make any decision or even allow yourself to have an emotional reaction.
Yeah, but what does that even mean? Because if there's no such thing as truth, then why would you ever conclude to trust yourself? So this is just tripping. This is just influence of tripping and just being completely lost
Towards something. Logic mixed with discernment is the only tools you have left in your arsenal that you can possibly fight with, right?
Yeah, for what? What purpose would you ever, use logic and discernment if it can never lead you to the truth? Because truth doesn't exist apparently. So how would you ever? I mean, it's like saying use the compass, but whichever way the needle points is it's just ambiguous. You can't trust it. So what good is the compass then? Just bosh. Just bosh. I probably clicked on the same one. Was it? Let's hope not. Oh no, I didn't. It's a different one. Okay, so
The purpose of a debate is not to win an argument. It's about exploring a complex topic. It's about presenting, challenging, and evaluating opposing viewpoints. It's about keeping an open mind and critically thinking about the fact that your viewpoint could be wrong. It's about analyzing evidence together to either persuade or be persuaded. But if your mind is not open to the possibility of what you are saying being incorrect, then there is no point in the debate. If you're not
wait, I thought you said that there was no correct. There's no truth. So you're telling people to be open to be swayed to what? Ultimately, it's the tactic that is being implemented here is to convince you that there's no such thing as good, there's no such thing as truth, there's no such thing as right. So by eliminating that, all you're left with is to conclude that, well, okay, well, things that I thought were wrong or lies or untrue somehow have a different explication. So I have to figure what that out means. And it just leaves you kind of in this open to just relativity, to succumb to your own ability to justify your own sin, your own unrighteousness. Because ultimately, there's no standard. There's no standard by which to hold anyone by, but yourself. So just be governed by your own standard, and the hell with everything else. Basically. So just do as thou wilt is the conclusion of what this man is promoting.
willing to change your mind about something, then there is no purpose. Debating has become entirely pointless because people just want to argue about how they reach their own conclusions without ever listening to the opposing side. It has become entirely just about winning. It's about learning something that you maybe didn't already know. Everyone wants to just act like they already have all the facts and you can't teach them anything new. Only a fool thinks himself to be wise, and a wise man knows himself to be a fool.
I hate to break it to you, but satellites are fake.
And a wise man knows himself to be a fool. Oh yeah. So this is all just false humility. False humility. So I think there's just maybe a couple more that I saved. But, you know, let this be, of course, a opportunity to recognize that there is other people just like this man. And ultimately, they're reflections of what we once were. If we are honest with ourselves, we can recognize that at one point, we were, of course, this obstinate. We were this arrogant. We were this self-conceited in our own way, in our own understanding, where it was easy for us to discredit and mock and ridicule and belittle the Creator. And put in place, you know, relativity or this kind of ambiguous idea of goodness or love, and relying on the amassing of people by their own actions, by their own volition, to be the change. So the carnal mind is quick to blame God or blame the God of the Bible, or to speak against the holiness of God because of his judgment. But then man upholds his own judgment in place of that, in place of God's judgment. But then that makes man even more culpable. So if there is no God, and we're just essentially our own authority, then what does that say about what man is doing or has been doing? That just shows how evil or how wrong or how untuned, right? Or how unaligned we choose relentlessly to be. That we choose time and time again to sear our conscience, to break a so-called inner compass all the while we just in name, in word only, virtue signal relentlessly, all the while doing evil in their darkness because of the self-gratification that a carnal mind operates under. The world is filled with this self-deceit, the self-destructive so-called behaviors or nature that seems to be inevitable or unovercomable. And ultimately it is, because it is what keeps man in rebellion against God. It's what keeps man in the flesh, to live out his days in the flesh, thinking that that's the only thing that is, and ultimately sealing his own destruction, accepting his own fate of failure, accepting his own fate of self-discovery, self-expression, self-fulfillment, self-actualization, all in denial of receiving the gift of God.
Greatest deception that has ever been achieved is religion, particularly Christianity. Because
so notice how he said that he's I'm not out here to attack any religion or Christians. Yeah, of course he is.
this is the leading religion with, I think, 30% of people believing in it. This means that a third of our population is under the impression that if you don't believe in this specific God, then you are going to burn in hell for an infinite amount of time, for eternity. That is absolutely mind-blowing that that amount of people all believe in that. Now, it can all easily be disproven with just simple logic, but isn't it kind of funny how the rules regarding religion are awfully similar to the rules that are set in place for society? So with Christianity, it's heaven if you believe and hell if you don't believe. In school, it's pay attention and be good and you pass, but if you don't, then you fail. In everyday life, it's don't break the law and go to work and you'll be all right, but if you break the law, then you go to jail. Religion is just another psyop that keeps people obedient and following the rules, and it completely stops you from asking the big questions and just closes off your mind.
I mean, this is all so-called true if you accept that today's so-called Christianity is what God actually promotes. But any person that actually is true and honest with what the words of God say would conclude that there is a huge gulf between what the actual word of God portrays as being the promises of God or the fulfillment of that transformation to the person who believes, and then what you find in the world. So I would say that the world has essentially hijacked so-called Christianity and presented it as just another worldly identity, which has allowed for this season to coexist, if you will, in the world. So while Jesus calls us out of the world, right, to be in the world but not of the world, right, the world actually calls you to be part of it and that you can be of the world. So it's what is obvious to me that is the MO of so-called Christianity today. So in name only, having all these denominations, so you can be Orthodox, you can be Catholic, you can be Protestant, you can be any, all these so-called titles. But inwardly, people are living as though they're just the same of the world, which is why you can clearly see that no longer is Christianity a power. And by power, I mean the promises of the Spirit of God in the person who is born again, but is rather just a worldly identity, just as it is to be a fireman or a doctor or a public servant, public official, or a professor, or this or the other. Because ultimately it doesn't mean what God says it means. Which is interesting, because ultimately I think that is what's going to come in the fulfillment of the prophecy of the Word of God. That just as in the days of Moses, right, being opposed by Jannes and Jambres, well, so too will the sons of God be opposed by the world one day, where the truth of the matter is revealed. Meaning the power of God being made manifest as it was in the days when Jesus had his ministry and post his death, burial, and resurrection, leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem and the fulfillment of the return of Christ in that generation, where Jesus Christ then ruled for 1,000 years with his saints. So, yeah, the religion of today that says it's Christendom is a deception, because it has injected itself into the timeline, if you will, and has watered down the message, even though it does relentlessly speak of God. So it speaks Christianese. It has presented this whole rhetoric, this whole narrative of what it is Christianity is, the church fathers, church history, but it leads to a powerless congregation, because it just leads people to nominally identify with God and not with their spirit. I found this one kind of just on the comic side, because he basically is complaining that none of the people that he knows, including his friends and family, like comment on his videos or this or the other. And in another video, he admits that he was raised Catholic or something like that. So, I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise to him that by the mere kind of content of what you promote, or the influence that you're putting out there, is antithetical to your family, right? If your family continues to be Christian and you now kind of reject it or even speak against it, why would you be surprised that they don't either encourage you in your endeavors or promote or comment in your videos? I mean, it's kind of like a no-brainer. It's like, yeah, no wonder they wouldn't kind of be following your videos if it's, antithetical to supposedly their worldview. Perhaps they're, praying for you. Perhaps they're, not wanting to publicly engage with the influence you're putting out there. So it's just kind of surprising.
None of my family or friends follows me on here. I think there's only one person who I actually talk to in the real world who follows my account. Like, where it shows you your suggestions for people you may know or might want to follow?
This is just kind of like, false virtue, false humility, but also kind of this sense of false persecution, or kind of like, just because people don't accept you, that somehow means that you're speaking the truth, right? Or that they're just too dumb to want to wake up, or this. I mean, I've seen that kind of narrative be weaponized against people. The sheeple, right? Oh, it's a stupid sheeple that don't want to wake up.
scroll through that and I'll see like 100 different people that I know in the real world, but not a single one of them follows my account. I don't really care, you know, it's just that like it's kind of awkward because like I know for a fact that my videos will occasionally pop up for them. And the thing is too is when I meet new people and we start talking about social media or TikTok or whatever it is, then I'll mention the fact that I make videos and that I make money on here, and they think it's like the coolest thing ever. Like I'm a union carpenter, so I'm constantly getting sent to new locations to work, so I'm always meeting new people. Pretty much most of the time I won't even bring it up. They'll usually mention it to me like, hey, I think I saw you on TikTok last night. Every time they're like, dude, that's so cool. Like I never seen anyone that talks about the stuff that you talk about. They're always like, I gave you a follow and I watched a bunch of your videos. Like that's so sick. So I know that my family and friends and people who just know me in real life are seeing my videos too. But I don't know, it seems almost like they just like intentionally ignore it. Almost feels like what I do kind of pushes the people closest to me away. My girl obviously follows and watches my videos, but we make content together, so that doesn't really
Yeah, because remember, she spit in the Bible, and that's how you knew she was the one.
count. If I saw someone on here that I know personally in real life, especially one of my friends or family members, and they're on here making a video speaking their mind, you better believe I'm gonna leave a comment on that video and making them aware that I saw that video. Even if it was just someone that like I knew from high school but we weren't even friends. I don't know, it's just weird. Not a single one of my suggestions and people from the real world wants anything to do with me. It does make me a little bit sad though, just that like none of my family even acknowledges what I do. Biggest supporters are people that I just don't even know and have never even met. And I really want to let you guys know that I do appreciate all of the support all the time.
So of course, it's just an opportunity to kind of encourage people to subscribe, support him in his cause. Why, oh, why does it not? There we go.
So it seems like all anyone really cares about right now is revolution, accountability, and justice for what they're reading in the Epstein files. But you must realize at this point that it is impossible to get millions of people all on the same page and attack all at once. There's really only one logical way to go about serving justice in this type of situation. But before I explain how you would need to go about taking out people that eat babies, you need to understand that there's reasons behind why they're intentionally exposing this stuff. Everyone needs to calm down and think about why. But I've explained this in a lot of other videos, so that's not what I'm going to talk about. As much as I'd love to see a revolution, they've designed society in a way where that isn't possible. People won't stop going to work because they literally can't because of prices. Most people don't have any resources or...
I mean, it's just obvious, right, that it's a mechanism by which to keep man in his carnal mind, right? To be constantly in a state of indignation or in a state of affirming themselves or convincing themselves that they're actually good people, right? Because they can judge others as evil people. So it allows people to continue in their own self-righteousness, right? And basically hardening their hearts because they are being groomed to give in to hatred.
supplies because they've kept us out of homes. You're emotionally depleted because of psychological desensitization. Because of this, you've also lost your most important feature as a human, empathy. You're distracted, you're divided, the list goes on, you get it. All of this is by design for many reasons. Now, as for the justice that many of you seem to so deeply desire, I don't blame you, justice should be served, but it should have been served 20, 30 years ago. But a lot of you are just figuring this stuff out now, and that's okay. A lot of these reactions just seem a little bit fake to me anyways, because if you actually wanted justice, you'd go out there and do it instead of on your phone looking for views. Your video going viral doesn't help you in the slightest bit when it comes to justice for these victims. 99% of the people...
So he's contradicting his own platform. So he's doing this for clicks because he admits that he makes money off of this. So obviously he's in it for the views. He's in it for the clout. He's in it for the increase, right? The bottom line. So what's this guy talking about? I mean, the most ridiculous thing at the end, his conclusion is he calls people to, that the only way to do it is to basically assassinate people. So it's just amazing.
People that saw your video will still go to work tomorrow, and so will you. But again, it's not your fault. This is by design. So first of all, you wouldn't need millions of people behind you to do this. You wouldn't even need thousands of people. Even if you did manage to organize like 50 to 100,000 people and we were all going to go storm the White House, they have technology that we can't comprehend. It would be squashed in a second. It wouldn't even be talked about. It wouldn't be on the news. We know all that's fake. The only way this can ever happen is if very small groups of people go after specific people individually. It would need to be a very stealth operation. Just a few different assassins finding out where these people are and going after one at a time. If you're looking to get this thing done.
So amazing, right? Calling people up to their guys, stand up for, don't you want to be the change? What a joke. Yet he's deeply offended when God intervenes in the affairs of man to eradicate evil. Oh, he'll take great offense with that. Oh, how horrible! It's genocide. But when he says how to get rid of a group of people, it's okay. It's okay when he says it because, well, ultimately it's to get rid of evil. Don't you want to get rid of evil, folks? What a joke.
Coming at Christianity lately and that I have a problem with Christians. I have no problem at all with Christians or anyone that's religious.
So gaslighting you again. Of course he does have a problem with Christians. He said the number one, obstacle is Christianity. The number one deception, right? Or the number one object in man's way has been the lie of Christianity, according to him. So of course he has a problem with it.
Raised Catholic, my whole family are Christians. As I got older, I didn't agree with it at all, and I was able to identify the manipulation behind it. This is what my whole page happens to revolve around, is how to identify psyops, lies, and manipulation tactics. And religion happens to fall into those categories. Some people fully agree, yeah, we've been lied to, and history is a lie, and school is brainwashed.
So this is interesting, right? Because this would, if he's really actually what he says he is, a truther, or after knowledge that leads to kind of getting rid of that which is false, then concluding that the message or the promise of God is false is pretty significant. And why would that be the conclusion instead of concluding that the institutions of man are what's at fault and not actually God himself? So the institution of man that says it represents God is the falsity. And if we believe the institutions of man, right, if he rejects, kind of like NASA and this and da, then why does he accept the so-called linear timeline that the Jesuits present? Would it not be in his best interest to actually look into what the prophecy of God says would happen after the 1,000-year reign of Christ and his saints? Of course it would be in his best interest, but of course he hasn't looked into it. He hasn't looked into it.
And everything we've been taught has pretty much just been manipulation. But they're stubborn and seem to think that religion hasn't been a part of all of these lies. They seek your obedience and your submissiveness. And people will be like, yeah, that's why we go to school, because they want you obedient and to listen and not ask any questions later on in life. But how is religion and the Bible not doing the exact same thing? If you're under the impression that no matter how bad things get, then you don't have to worry because Jesus is coming back to save you, then you are most likely not going to do anything about it. This is why there's millions of bot comments on here right now of all people saying Jesus is coming back, God is the truth, the life, the whatever. It's giving real people validation that they're seeking, that there's other people out here that think the same way that they do. If you think about it, it's just another form of controlled opposition. Controlled ops cause you to believe that they're putting in all the work towards investigating and looking into things so that you don't have to. As long as you're listening to them, then you're staying well informed. It's the same thing. It's causing you to take zero action into your own hands. Really want a revolution? Stop acting like someone's going to come and do it for us, because that's exactly what they want. Just the same as school, the Bible and Jesus just causes people to become...
Yeah, so nothing new under the sun. He's calling people up to revolt. What a shame. He's calling people up to the slaughter.
Obedient. And don't try and tell me that they attempt to hide God from you. If this was the case, you wouldn't have to swear on a Bible in court. If this was the case, it would be called the theory of God, but it's not. All politicians wouldn't claim to believe in God. They wouldn't mention God in the Pledge of Allegiance. If they were...
Yeah, notice how he even in his own statement, they claim to believe in God. So, it would be obvious, wouldn't it? Why isn't it obvious to him? Of course, because he's blinded. But people have used the cloak, right? They're nominal Christians only because they know that if they appeal to that, right? Because it is an appeal to the truth. But yet in their actions, they deny him. So they, in name only, right, say that Christ is Lord, but in their own actions, they deny him. So that's what Jesus himself calls a hypocrite. And they're none of his. So this man is clearly upset and angry with the hypocrites, and rightly so, but he has equivocated the hypocrite as the real deal. So it's kind of his own blunder, his own carnal mind that has led him astray.
We're attempting to hide God from you. They wouldn't sell Bibles. There wouldn't be several churches in every town. We wouldn't take Sundays off from work. We wouldn't use the term BC when we talk about thousands of years ago. They don't attempt to hide God from you. They put it in your face. It was the original psyop after the last reset.
Yeah, because the devil cannot destroy the truth. All he can do is try and corrupt it. And what better way to do it than to co-opt and twist and manipulate the word of God. All the while, we still have the truth amongst us. I mean, just because people have used or use the word of God to present a lie doesn't mean that the Bible is the lie. So that is kind of the conflation, the error that man does in using that as an excuse to dismiss the promises of God or the reality of the existence of God because of what man does, because of his deceptive behavior, the manipulation that man does to himself and others.
Same thing that's about to happen right now. That's why there's all this talk about alien disclosure. That's why there's all these bots talking about the return of Jesus. They're preparing you for the next psyop after the reset. Like I said in previous videos, they're going to show the world something that they can't possibly deny. You're going to have no choice but to believe it, follow it, and worship it. It's the same thing they do after every reset. People like to think that God in the Bible was just like this one truth that slipped by all the lies. No. Know that most Christians will never accept this because they've just put their faith in it for far too long, and switching up now would just change.
Yeah, so what this man is just saying is the end goal, that by the influence that this man himself is promoting, so this ambiguity, there's no right, there's no wrong, there's only gray. So by that influence will man inevitably have to accept what comes next, because they don't have that sharpness, they don't have the truth. So of course they're going to succumb to the lie because of this false righteousness that this man himself is promoting, that has seared their conscience. So what's coming next, of course, they're going to go along with it, hook, line, and sinker, because they rejected the truth. I'll open 2 in a row just so maybe I don't have to open them one at a time.
Having humility and a willingness to keep learning. No matter what you've learned, read, or been taught, it isn't the whole truth. And yes, it's true that it's easier to fool a person than to convince them that they've been fooled. But only a fool thinks himself to be wise. A wise man knows himself to be a fool. Now, the noblest way to learn wisdom is through reflection, experience, and time. Through imitation. Wisdom is gained through failure, experiencing loss and suffering. Fighting for wisdom through trial and error. A wise man doesn't need validation or confirmation. He simply looks inward, trusting in yourself instead of what you've been told. A wise man doesn't sit around waiting for someone to come and save him. He saves himself. Wisdom comes from confronting fear. Wisdom will come naturally after you can accept that you've been a fool. Wisdom comes from watching and listening. When a wise man thinks he found the answer, he changes the question. There are no right answers. There's only the adventure in becoming wise enough to realize this.
So it just sounds like he just read some Buddhist, pamphlet, right? Somebody left a Buddhist pamphlet at his door and he's just like regurgitating it. Because everything that he just said relies on the notion that there is good and evil. There is right and wrong. So that you can determine when you're in error Otherwise, you're never in error. You never fail because there's no right and wrong. So what is this guy saying? Just flawed. I think we already saw this one.
The time what my thoughts are on religion and what I believe in. This isn't something that I really enjoy talking about because I don't like to make...
Yeah, we did see that one already. And the last one is this one. Of course, he has way more on his channel, but these are just the ones that I highlighted or saved in that folder. I think we've already seen this one too.
They're trying to lead you away from Jesus and the Bible. No, they're not. It's literally the exact opposite. We use it to describe time. BC and AD. They make you swear on the Bible in court. In a court of law, you have to swear on a Bible. Swear on God that you're telling the truth. God is mentioned in the Pledge of Allegiance. All politicians talk about God and claim to believe in God. Presidents are...
I mean, that should just tell him, and I mentioned it before, that the devil can only use that which is already edified, right? So the foundation that is Christ. There's nothing else. The devil cannot put another foundation other than the foundation that already exists. Is that which left a mark on the creation that cannot be erased, which is the life, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But what he can do and does is present a perversion. He presents a inversion. So everything that this man is saying, yeah, I mean, that's why you see all these hypocrites out there claiming to believe, claiming to be Christians, claiming in name only, right? But in their deeds, they are workers of iniquity.
They're always saying things like, God bless you. Oh, God bless our country. Everyone all over the world says, God bless you when someone sneezes. Even though we all know at this point that the story behind that is incorrect. Yet we still do it. There's multiple churches in every single town and city. We take Sundays off from work. Whose birthday are we celebrating on the biggest holiday of the year, Christmas? And what about the fact that they sell Bibles? You understand that if they really wanted to hide God from you, none of this stuff would exist. No one is trying to hide God from you in the slightest bit. It is the exact opposite. There's a really good reason behind why there's been a sharp uptick in all the talk about Christianity lately. There's a reason why there's demonic symbolism hidden in plain sight. There's a reason why they've made you aware of all the ritualistic sacrifices and the Satan worshiping. There's a reason why we're allowed to talk about the elites and the higher-ups all worshiping the devil. Because all of these things further your belief in religion. Christians are desperate to be right in what they believe in. So if you show them the existence of the devil, then they're like, oh my God, I knew it. I promise you, this is nothing more than a psyop, all of it. There's a reason why they intentionally created the story of karmic retribution, and this is the excuse for why they have to show you stuff in plain sight. And there's a reason why you're allowed to talk about all of this stuff, because they want you to think that it's true. There's a reason why there's millions of bot accounts all saying that Jesus is coming back. They want people to turn to Christianity and religion right now. This is the main goal of the one world religion that's coming. Every single thing we're being made aware of right now and manipulated by is intentional. It's not for your benefit. The psyop that's about to take place is only going to work on people that are religious.
Every reset had the same agenda.
It's only going to work on the people that are religious. That's hilarious. But what he did say that I would agree with is that there is this effort, right, in so-called Christendom, coming from the very top, right, from the Jesuits, from the order of the architects of this deception, which is a presenting a effort of a return to so-called belief or faith, but in a one world kumbaya version, right? Which is why the Vatican has been actively involved in the whole unfolding of what we call post-industrial revolution, post-enlightenment, and in this technocratic reality we live in, where science and religion are not at odds, but in fact complement one another, and where apparently we are willing to baptize any alien race that we might encounter. And that we are working towards a humanity joining itself, joining as a world nation instead of divisive warring against and killing one another. So it is coming to this kind of world religion based on a false premise of superiority, right? This false premise that what supersedes or what joins us all is this kind of like worldly love. Because we all accept our carnality, we all accept our carnal mind and our desires and this and love of the world. And that we're expecting, Jesus to finally return after 2,000 years. All that is based on the notion that we accept this timeline. And ultimately, because it leads to a watered down version of what we even think it is to be Christian. Because what I see in the Word of God is that to be identified as a son and daughter of God is actually a rejection of any worldly inheritance. For our inheritance is a heavenly one. So there's there's nothing to die or, want to kill and reconfigure in the world, but that which only to recognize as a receipt of the gift and the evidence in the life that we once lived and the transformation that leads us into a completely different life based on the Spirit that He has given us. Because that is the power. The power isn't in going out there like the Catholics call you to, or any ecumenical work that calls you to be the change, right? To be out there willing to go and change the world, to bring about heaven on earth. For if you don't realize, that's exactly what the Jews wanted in the days that Jesus was walking the earth. They wanted this earthly governance, this earthly warrior to deliver them from the oppression of Rome. They wanted to subvert all the other nations to fulfill what God did in fact promise them, but they did not see it as a total transformation, a reconciliation of all things through Christ. They saw it as a carnal restoration of a earthly kingdom where they would subdue all other nations, not realizing that Christ Himself was that reconciliation. He was that transformation, and He was that promise of life, that newness of redemptive power that would break the shackles of oppression and make every man and woman free from the oppression of the world. So do not be misled into this false narrative. And of course, the long suffering of our God is salvation. And just as it is offered to this man and any other man or woman influenced by this rebellious spirit, it is the goodness of God that leadeth a man to repentance, that affordeth a man to repent. So may we all have that mercy that we have received. May we have the mercy, and may we forgive those who mistreat others, and those who blaspheme God, and those who essentially have taken the banner of warring against God. Because ultimately they and everyone that is led by that influence is going to be that which stands itself against God. And anyone who claims the authority and lordship of Christ, which is the end goal and has been the MO since the whole entering of the deceptive spirit post-millennium reign of Christ and his saints. So I will conclude. So we saw this man and his ultimate influence, which is very much parallel to that which is promoted by, or was promoted by, this man. This man talked a lot about the reality of our existence, the reality of our earth, etc., etc. And he has been found dead by suicide, apparently. And of course, you have people saying, "Oh, he was murdered. He was, blah blah blah." But I remember I used to listen to this guy years ago. But I remember that he would talk about how he did, because a lot of people asked him, like, "Hey, how are you not? Are you afraid? Are you afraid that people will come after you because of what you're saying and this and the other?" He's like, "Well," he would say in these interviews, right? He would say, "Well, no, because I know that I am protected. I have protection from kind of like this galactic sense, right?" And he claimed to be receiving said protection because of the way he lived. And he said that he would be fearful if he didn't actually abide by the things that he preached. So by that declaration, he was admitting that he knew that there was kind of like this responsibility in the individual to adhere to the so-called righteousness that he preaches, because the minute that you stepped outside of that, or the minute that you went against that, or lived in a hypocritical way, or kind of said one thing but then walked a different way, that would open you up to danger. So interestingly, that his demise, or the way that he is described to have gone out, either way, either by murder or by suicide, it's not particularly corresponding to what he taught, because it would mean, by his own admission, that he no longer had the protection that he said he was receiving because of basically his righteous way that he lived. So either he stopped living righteously, or he slipped up, or something happened where it opened. I mean, I'm speaking by his own teachings. So either he went astray and then opened up to this negativity to enter his own life, and so I wanted to read just apparently this overview that, when prompted, I asked, did David Wilcock teach the implications of doing harm? Answer. Based on his work, particularly in Wisdom Teachings on Gaia TV, David Wilcock has taught about the implications of doing harm, framed within a spiritual and metaphysical context rather than just a moral one. Spiritual consequences. Wilcock has presented the view that the world is a cosmic classroom designed to teach love. He has advocated for refraining from causing harm to oneself and others. So suicide seems like the ultimate harm to self. So I guess he went against his own teaching at the very end. Metaphysical causations. In his teachings, he had explored how negative thoughts or actions can have harmful effects, linking them to energy, DNA, and the necessity of protection from negative influences. So that, corresponds to what I just said. I remembered of what he said in his interviews when asked if he was afraid for his life. He did claim that he was a homebody. He didn't really go out. He was more kind of isolated and very focused on his own well-being, to stay, to have clarity of mind, etc., to abide in this protection that he said he had because of his purity, or that he was able to kind of hone or maintain this protection by not, opening himself to be tempted to do something that would take away this protection. Encouragement of positivity. His teachings often highlight the need to avoid manipulation and control, suggesting that such actions bring negative rather than positive spiritual consequences. Interesting. So in this other prompt, I asked, did David Wilcock teach on what opens the door for harm? Answer, yes, David Wilcock. Because something I noticed, because I tried to find those interviews on YouTube that I remembered, but when you type in his name, it's just you get instantly bombarded with all the news art or the new info on his recent death. So it's impossible to navigate, or it doesn't provide you with a representative keyword search, because it only pops up, conspiracies to do with his death and this. So answer, yes, David Wilcock in his book or in his work on wisdom teachings, cosmic disclosure, and various books, frequently taught about spiritual protection and the actions that can open the door to negative influences or harm. His teachings often focused on the idea that negative entities or energies operate by exploiting specific energetic weaknesses, which is why I remember when he was saying in these interviews, right, the reason why he kept to himself and this or the other at home was because he didn't want to be vulnerable to these weaknesses that would kind of diminish his awareness or his consciousness or his cosmic, protection. Specific energetic weaknesses, a concept he often framed within the context of law of one and cosmic battle between positive and negative forces. Based on his teachings, factors that open the door for harm include fear and negative emotional states. Wilcock emphasized that maintaining fear, anger, anxiety, or low vibration emotions weakens an individual's protective energetic field, making them susceptible to negative entities. So something in his latter days, I guess, made him lose his protection, according to his own teachings. Lack of service to others orientation. He believed that focus solely on service to self rather than service to others allows negative forces to influence a person. Suppression of truth. Ignoring one's inner guidance or participating in deception can create energetic imbalances, opening the door to negative experiences. So isn't that interesting, right? Because to be murdered, wouldn't that be the ultimate kind of opening the door for harm? Or even suicide, right? I mean, that's the ultimate, self-harm, right? So either way you look at it, it is harm, right? So by his own standard, by his own teachings, that means that he was, he succumbed to self-service. He he succumbed to, he capitulated, right, to deception, which led to his demise. Negatively polarized thoughts. He suggests that constantly focusing on negativity or engaging in the conspiracy of fear-based narratives rather than positive transformation can attract harm. Interesting. His work on Ascension Mysteries, Awakening in the Dream, urged followers to prepare for a massive evolutionary event by cultivating compassion, love, and forgiveness to protect themselves from these influences. So another key element of why I think intentionally this is being pumped out there to the masses is to kind of resuscitate this spirit, right? The spirit of everything that this man taught. Because people are going to now be looking into kind of his videos, this and the other. So it's kind of like this resurgence, right, of bringing into light, bringing to the forefront this influence that this man represents. So in this last prompt, I believe, I asked, in what videos did David Wilcock speak on the implications of giving in to temptation? Based on his teachings regarding spiritual ascension and the law of one, David Wilcock frequently discussed the implications of giving into temptation as a choice to follow service to self rather than service to others. These discussions often focused on the karmic consequences and the hindering of spiritual growth. Key areas: wisdom teachings. Throughout this series, particularly in episodes regarding the law of one, Wilcock discussed how temptations related to fear, greed, and ego create karmic burdens that necessitate repeating third density lessons. Cosmic disclosure. In interviews with Corey Good and others, Wilcock touched upon the temptations involved in elite control systems and the spiritual implications of engaging in negative behaviors. Awakening in the Dream. While not a video itself, his related lectures for this project emphasized that preparation for ascension requires overcoming temptation through dedication to forgiveness, compassion, and service to others. In various of his YouTube discussions, Wilcock often warned that giving into fear or temptation to trust in false narratives could lower one's vibrational frequency, hindering the ascension process. His philosophy taught that service to self, succumbing to temptation for personal gain, is a dangerous path that leads to spiritual stagnation, while service to others is the intended path for ascension. So isn't it just a very unfortunate end to that character, the way he just apparently just departed? But of course, it's the title of the video of today's recording is Proverbs 17:11. An evil man seeketh only rebellion, therefore a cruel messenger shall be sent against him. So obviously, the first series of videos which I showed clearly depict a rebellious influence. And clearly David Wilcock also promoted throughout his career this rebellious engagement, because ultimately he is a promoter of the inner path of self-righteousness, even though it's whitewashed and self-grandizing, because it gives the individual kind of like this virtuous spiritual lens by which to see themselves ultimately as God in the flesh, to do the works and to do the alignment, to self-ascend by your own ability to integrate, synthesize, and ultimately bring forth the transformation of this global kind of disclosure, right? The global consciousness by which to bring forth, bring into play, bring into manifestation this breaking of the veil, this going through the veil that will take us into the next phase of our own transformation, our becoming, our evolutionary path, if you will. Well, they knowingly or unknowingly are engaging in the only rebellion that exists, which is the rebellion against God.